Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
It is our pleasure to be joined right now by Jake Burns of the OBR. He runs the Browns Film Breakdown account over on Twitter. It's been a long time since we've talked to him, and I know he stays constantly busy breaking down Browns film, breaking down Minnesota Vikings film for new head coach Kevin Stefanski. Jake, man, it's been such a long time since we talked to you. We're glad that we're finally able to get you back on the podcast.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here, man. It seems like you don't have some banter over the course of 4 or 5 months, and everything changes with the Browns. So if we keep taking time off, it's going to be there's going to be 13 different new things that happen between then.
Yeah, definitely. You know, if you were put in like a coma for 9 months, can you imagine the amount of stuff you miss being a Browns fan? Like it would take like a series worth of Game of Thrones episodes in order to catch you up on everything that goes on around here, because there's so much drama, there's so much different things going on that you need like a Wikipedia and all this stuff just to keep track of everything that goes on. So we want to get you in here because the NFL Combine is going on right now, and look, the main issues with the Browns have been at least last season, well, the main issue was the offensive line. And that's where we kind of wanted to focus tonight. And I wanted to start out by asking the question of, because the Browns are looking towards the draft to help fix the offensive line issues, and rather than free agency, because that's going to cost you an arm or a leg, what's the balance of attempting to fix the offensive line with draft picks versus being very worried, relying on 2 rookies at the tackle positions in order to have success next year when you still have all this young talent on the team? You have a rookie quarterback under a rookie contract. You have all these guys you have to extend, and you think your window's kind of open right now based on recent history. So what's the balance of investing into 2 rookie offensive tackles and hoping that they don't struggle when, the recent history with, rookie tackles and rookie offensive linemen in general, it takes a few years for them to figure it out. So what's the balance here with this?
Well, it's interesting. There are certainly some different paths that they can go with this process. They can invest some money into these guys. They can, or they can dump some draft pick capital into them. So I think that it's pretty fair, although, no clear decision has been made on, Chris Hubbard necessarily. It seems like he would trend to probably be out the door. It hasn't been cut or anything, so I don't want to say it's guaranteed, but I think most people would presume that that's the route that they will go. You're looking for 2 tackles because Greg Robinson's not coming back because he's going to wind up in federal prison. So it looks like you have to make a call on how you want to use your assets. They've cleared up some money. They can clear up some more money. The free agency tackle market it's challenging with Costanzo going back to Indy. It appears it's Jack Conklin and then a bunch of guys tiers below him. So, if you're not going to spend the type of big money that Jack Conklin seems to be demanding, he's in the right market at the right time, or someone like New York might go out and try to pay him a lot of money. You probably look at saying, how are we going to fill these roles? I think the top of the draft has names, Jedrick Willis, Tristan Dwarfs, among others. that can obviously fill that role. Josh Jones, Mekhi Becton. There's plenty of names, right? You've all probably heard them. The top tier, you probably want to get a guy in the first 20 picks or so, and that opens the window to either taking one at 10, or or moving back maybe into the mid to late teens, and then trying to get one in that target area too. But it does feel to me, guys, like I don't foresee them using, with so many holes to fill. I don't see them using, an 18. I don't know. 18 still seems high. Maybe like a 15 to $17 million figure on Jack Conklin. So that means, you're probably going to take your guy either at 10 or in the teens if they move back a little bit. So they're probably looking at starting one rookie tackle. So then you got to say, okay, what's your next option? Are you going to try to play the mid to mid low tier on the free agency market? Somebody like Cordy Glenn, who was released from Cincinnati, among a few others that might make a little bit of sense at the tackle position, or are you going to double up on true talented tackles in the draft and kind of take your risk there? Because I think people forget there's two names that you should pay attention to, which is obviously Kendall Lam is back, who has starting experience in the NFL, started some for Cleveland last year. Not a great player by any stretch, but a guy who can at least be serviceable for a really affordable figure. You look at, if you're keeping Kendall Lam at the figure of around $2.5 million a year compared to Chris Hubbard, who's going to have a $7.5 million cap hit, it's a pretty easy decision to make, right? So if you do end up taking a tackle at 10 and then taking another tackle maybe round 2, 3, or 4, wherever you want to find that value, you're looking at 3 tackles, and then whether once Bill Callahan gets in, he's going to decide on what he thinks about Drew Forbes, who could potentially be a tackle too. I think he's a guard, but you never know. The most plausible route to me, guys, is they will double up in the draft. They will take a tackle around 10, and then try to draft one in the second, third, or fourth, depending on what value they like. If they trade back, they could take somebody else and then take a tackle maybe at the top of the second round, someone like Matthew Pert from UConn, along those lines. But I do think they come out of this draft with 2 tackles, one top tier guy and then one sort of mid to mid low tier guy, and then rely on Kendall Lam and maybe play the value market for another tackle too that they think can be serviceable. And then you have one anchor for the foreseeable future with your draft pick, and then maybe you hit gold with a late round guy too. So I don't think they're going to go tackle, and I don't think they're going to invest in somebody like Conklin to eat up a big chunk of a free agency market that they don't have a great, a great value in terms of cap space and the ratio of bodies that they need to bring in. So that's kind of where I'm at. 2 tackles in the draft. I certainly think one early, certainly think one mid to late, and then probably trying to play that value market too.
Jake, last month you wrote a great series of articles breaking down Kevin Stefanski's offense, and in the first part you talked about the wide zone run. When you look at the zone blocking scheme that Stefanski's bringing into Cleveland, what kind of qualities do they look for in offensive linemen? And when you're looking at some of these top offensive linemen in the draft, which of those do you think shows the best qualities that could fit Stefanski's zone blocking scheme?
Well, you're looking for guys who are good at movement skills, guys who can run. I think you got to pay attention to how much this scheme, the wide zone scheme, asks their linemen to run and cover ground and take steps. I know there's been NFL tracking data on these linemen for whether it's the Rams or whether it's San Francisco or Minnesota, about these linemen are running. I think, listen, I don't know the exact number, but I know it was at least double the figure of guys who are in a gap blocking scheme with more traditional drop back passing. These guys are asked to run more, move more, and be, have higher levels of endurance. So you're not going to see big, heavy, lumbering offensive tackle types, which I don't think Mekhi Becton is the type of guy. The Louisville kid is a non-athlete by any stretch. I think he's a great athlete, but I think you got to look at data with these guys, what they look for, which is athletes, quick twitch sort of offensive tackle types like Brian O'Neill, who was a converted tight end at Pittsburgh and then went to go on to be a second-round pick in Minnesota. You got to look for those types of guys, and I think 320 is about the maximum 325 that they go, because they want guys who can move and find that endurance. And I think that's something that they'll look to pigeonhole. You got to have guys who, like I said, can turn the corner and hook, who can run down the line and seal somebody. in terms of cutting off the backside, or guys who can run and push someone lateral. So it's a mixture. And then you got to have guys who can pass block too. I mean, they got to be able to get back and drop back, kick step, get where they need to get in pass drops and all of that as well. And that's why they look for athletes, but who have functional, really good core strength, but can really get out and move a little bit too. And I think obviously the first guy in the grouping that comes to mind is Tristan Dwarfs, who plays in that zone, that wide zone scheme that Iowa runs, have run forever under Kirk Ferentz, and I think he's a great fit. He's a good athlete. He tested well. He will test well. Excuse me. And I know that the Browns are very interested in him. He makes a ton of sense. Can play right or left tackle, depending on where he's most comfortable. And they find him fit. Andrew Thomas, the kid from Georgia, is another type who can run, and he's a good athlete. Can get lateral where he needs to get, strong enough. I think he's kind of slept on a little bit. He's slipped down boards a little bit. Not sure why, in my opinion. I certainly think he's really good at understanding body angles and getting where he needs to get and getting his rear end to seal off, run lanes and all that stuff, and a good pass blocker. So those two make plenty of sense. Josh Jones a little bit later makes a little bit of sense if he doesn't, if they decide to move back a little bit into the teens, 20s. And then another guy I like there is Matt Pert, the kid from UConn. I think he's got ridiculously long arms, but he's still very strong. Did 28 bench reps with like a 36-inch arm, which is just kind of wild to think about. I think he's been slept on, but there's some people who really like him, and I'm one of them. So I think there are some names there that fit that scheme. I think Jedrick Willis is more of a gap guy, but he's good, but I imagine he goes earlier. There's plenty of names that can fit in the later rounds, but the guys that you need to pay attention to early on there is certainly Wirf, certainly Thomas, and then certainly Josh Jones is another name, and then Pert too.
Jake, as we wrap up here, I got one more question about the offensive line. And, last year, they rotated some guys in there at right guard throughout the season. How do you feel about that position going into next season with where they're at right now?
Sorry, you cut out there. Can you ask that question one more time?
Yeah. So the Browns rotated a few different guys at the right guard position last season. How do you feel about the right guard spot going into next season with who they have there currently?
Well, I don't feel great about it necessarily. I think Wyatt Teller has some qualities that they can use, and he's an athletic guard who can get out and move a little bit. I think we should feel fine. I think we'll be able to get a good feel for how they feel about him by how they approach free agency, right? I think that they will certainly look at if you see them sign somebody along the interior of the offensive line, it is probably going to mean that they don't trust him, right? I think that we'll know that pretty quickly. If they feel good about Teller and Forbes inside, and Callahan thinks he can mold one of those guys, you will probably not see them be all too active in the frontline interior offensive line guys. So I'm not sure. I don't have that answer. I think Teller can play in the scheme. I think he did a fine job when he was asked to play in the wide zone stuff that the Browns ran from the gun. And he's a functional athlete. It's just about kind of his cognitive ability and always knowing where to go, where to be. He'll be in a new offense again. Noted that was some of the issue he had in Buffalo, and I know that was some of the stuff holding him back when he started here last year, when the season began, because he came in so late. But there's no reason to think he can't figure it out. And like I said, we'll have a feel pretty quickly for what they think of him and what they think of Forbes when free agency kicks off. If they look to attack that, or certainly in the draft, we could get a feel for how if they draft an interior guy in the middle to late portion of the draft. But for now, I think that it feels like, if I had to guess, it feels like they don't need another hole. They've created some, and some have sort of organically come up. They need to fill some other important positions, and I think my guess, and I'm certainly this is all conjecture on my end, is that they'll go into the season with Teller and Forbes at right guard and sort of see if they can get one of those guys to solidify.
All right, Jake, I truly appreciate you coming on. Like we mentioned before we started here, it's been a long time since we talked, and we need to make this more of a habit, because the information that you have, the stuff that you're able to gather, it is some of the best out there in the Cleveland media landscape. And even beyond that, your work has always been very good. And if you want to let everyone know where you can read your work, where to follow you on Twitter, all that kind of stuff, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter at Jake_Burns18, and then most of my content is really all of my writing content's at the OBR. So subscribe there if you want, to read that and see some of the other great stuff that the OBR has to offer. And then you can also find Browns Film Breakdown, the podcast that I run through Blue Wire. That's available on iTunes and Spotify and all those fun places. So a privilege to be on, guys. You know, I really have nothing but respect for the work you guys do. I think you do great stuff, and anytime you want me to be back on, I'm always here.
All right, Jake, we absolutely appreciate it, and we'll be sure to talk to you soon.
All right, guys, thanks.
All right, Jack, it was great to talk to Jake Burns again. It's been a while, and I'm glad you two finally got to talk on a podcast for a little bit. What we want to do here for the rest of the episode is we're going to talk a little about the Combine, and then we have a live mock draft that we're going to do on the back half of that. So, Jack, with the NFL Combine going up, today is Thursday, February 27th. Today, the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends all worked out, and you're starting to see some of the guys who, look impressive athletically. And I guess that really leads me into my first question and topic to discuss is, how much stock can we really put into the Combine when, you have all this film on these guys for the past 3 years in college. Maybe some only have 1 year of film. How much stock do you put into the Combine, and what are the things that we can truly learn from this?
Well, I mean, us as fans and people that are studying football the way we do, we tend to get excited over what they do on the field. But I mean, when you look at it for the bigger picture, what the teams are doing, they're there to talk to the players. This is like their first chance to get to talk to a lot of the underclassmen. Obviously, the Browns have done a lot of work already with the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine Game, getting to know some of these prospects, but they get their hands on them. They get to talk to them, even though they get less interviews now. The time has been shrunk down. And the one big thing, and Andrew Berry said this in an interview earlier this week, that the biggest thing that they take away from it is the medical reports. You get to find out, their medical history. They're poked and prodded till the ends of the earth by doctors, and you get a true sense of how healthy these guys are. If there's injuries that weren't known before, obviously this week already, Thaddeus Moss, the tight end out of LSU, turns out he has a Jones fracture, has to get surgery. Obviously we know about Tua Tagovailoa, his hip injury. So I think, we can't take away too much from it. We get excited when we see these guys 40 times their verticals, how they look on the field in drills. But at the end of the day, the teams are more or less there to get their medical reports, get their first crack at talking to these players, breaking down film with them, asking some ridiculous questions like they have in the past. So, that's the bigger takeaway, how I look at things when you look at the Combine.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there. This is the first opportunity that teams can really get a chance to talk to these guys. And there's an interview that Tristan Dwarfs had where he discussed his meeting with the Browns already. The Browns have met with quite a few offensive linemen already, which is not a shock to anybody based on what we saw last year, the conversation that we just had with Jake. So it's certainly a good time for a new front office. Andrew Berry, we saw Paul DePodesta there as well. So there's certainly this is certainly probably the best opportunity, other than maybe the Senior Bowl and a couple of the All-Star games, that you have to talk to these guys. Now, the Browns didn't have anybody down at the Senior Bowl besides the two guys that were let go.
Wolf and Highsmith.
Wolf and Highsmith. It has been too long since I've done this. I'm losing my memory here. But yeah, those two guys were down there. So how much did they really bring back with them for the Browns? So
and their scouting department was there as well, which is still intact.
True. So these guys have this time during the Combine to figure these things out, interview these players, get the medicals like you mentioned, and that's the stuff that is what makes the Combine the most valuable. The bright lights and the drills, yeah, they're nice. They're mostly for show, which is why the Combine and the NFL moved it to prime time this year. You get a real sense of things when, or you can get more of a sense of things when players hold the workouts, or you bring the guys in for workouts. They're allowed so many pre-draft visits, and that's when you get a sense of where a team might be leaning in terms of taking a player. So that's all coming up for sure. And there's a lot of speculation that's going to be going on from now until the draft, which is approximately 2 months away now. I forget what the actual day is, but we're pushing 60 days, maybe less than 60 days till the draft. So I know it's the beginning of silly season. That's kind of started up, and but it's fun to speculate. That's why we have all this information out there, and it's why we do mock drafts. It's why we play the free agency game, who we're going to bring in. It's fun to do this kind of stuff, but in the end, all we want to do is win football games, and this is a start of that process because it all starts with the draft. So what we want to do now is we're going to go through a mock draft. We're going to do the top 10 picks until the Browns pick at number 10. So obviously the first pick belongs to Cincinnati Bengals. And Jack, when you look at this pick, I think this one is kind of penciled in already. I don't know if you can put it in a Sharpie, but I think it's in pencil right now that it's going to be Joe Burrow. I don't know if you want to agree with that or not, but he talked about this week. He kind of squashed down the rumors that he didn't want to play for Cincinnati. He's going to play for any team that drafts him. Is this where it's headed right now?
Oh, definitely. I think once he said that he would play for whoever drafts him, I think you can actually put it in Sharpie. Joe Burrow is going to be the pick. He's coming back home to the state of Ohio, and he's going to wear a Bengals uniform, and it's going to suck, but it's also going to be fun to watch him and Baker Mayfield duel it out for the next, hopefully, decade in the AFC North.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game, and obviously having the ties to Ohio State, he'll have a lot of fans down there in Cincinnati. Being here for those couple seasons he was with the Buckeyes, not really getting a chance to play, but he's definitely going to be a fun guy to watch. And this if they do select him, this AFC North is full of young guys and quarterbacks. You have Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. You got Baker Mayfield here with the Browns. You have potentially Joe Burrow down in Cincinnati. I know Ben Roethlisberger is just working to come back this season. I wouldn't be surprised if they take a quarterback in this draft at some point, somebody that they can groom. I don't think they believe that Mason Rudolph could be the guy moving forward. So I think that having that matchup between those three young guys is going to be really fun to watch. And we've seen a couple of matchups between Baker and Lamar, how fun those games were. So adding more guys into the mix, and you're going to have the youngest division in the NFL in terms of quarterbacks in the AFC North, because there's no doubt in my mind that Burrow is going to start from day one with the Bengals. Jack, second pick, Washington Redskins. What do you
got? We're going to go Chase Young, edge rusher out of Ohio State. I mean, he is the best player in the draft. There has been a little talk this week that, they're going to bring in Burrow, they're going to bring in Tua Tagovailoa, and, they could very well go quarterback here. I mean, much like Arizona had the decision last year, whether it was sticking with Rosen or drafting Kyler Murray, which they ultimately did. Dwayne Haskins, he started showing flashes at the end of the year, but you got a new regime there with Ron Rivera. So they may go quarterback. They may not think Haskins is the guy. But in this scenario, they're going to stick with Haskins, and they're going to bring another Buckeye in. Chase Young will be the cornerstone on the defensive side of the ball for them for the next decade, and he's unquestionably the best player in the draft, and he makes their defense instantly better from day one. So Chase Young's the pick here.
This pick, the second pick, to me, I know it's early on in the process, but I kind of see this as prime trade target for teams like Miami, the LA Chargers, the Carolina Panthers, and potentially the Jacksonville Jaguars, those teams that need a quarterback. Um, I see that pick as a definite potential spot if you want to jump ahead of somebody to get the guy that you want, whether that be Justin Herbert or Tua, in there at the second pick. I think that's definitely a trade opportunity that could be had. I know it's going to take a lot to move up there, but it's certainly a route that they could go. All right, with the third pick, the Detroit Lions. Now, to me, this is kind of a wild card here. I've seen many different players mocked at this position to the Lions. I've seen a quarterback on there. I've seen Jeffrey Okudah going there. Uh, I've seen Derek Brown going there. This is a very tough one, Jack. And for me, I'm kind of leaning towards Okudah here with the Lions. I think that this is also an opportunity where somebody could move up to trade, especially if Chase Young goes number 2 and one of those teams that I mentioned wants to get a quarterback. I think this is definitely an opportunity there as well. So for right now, without doing any kind of trades, I'm kind of leaning towards Okudah in the spot.
Yeah, that would be the pick for me as well at 3. Like you said, this is a prime spot for a possible trade when you have Miami and the Chargers at 5 and 6, both teams likely to take a quarterback, and then you have Carolina. And you mentioned Jacksonville. I don't know if they're in the QB market with Gardner Minshew right now, but you have a team like the Colts maybe back at 13, maybe Tampa, one of those teams in the teens that maybe they cough up like a Godfather offer worth of picks for Detroit, who has a lot of holes, and they could move back and garner a ton of picks. But in this scenario, we're not doing trades. So at 3, I'm with you. Okudah is one of the top players in the draft. You pair him up with Darius Slay if Slay stays in Detroit, and then you have a shutdown tandem there in the secondary, and then Matt Patricia can continue to build the defense from within.
And as we move on to pick number 4, the New York Giants have that pick. Now, Dave Gettleman discussed trading this pick this week. He said that the Giants are open for business regarding the 4th pick. So, if 1, 2, and 3 go to form that we said, with Burrow going 1, Chase Young going 2, Okudah going 3, a team that wants a quarterback to jump in front of Miami Dolphins, who presumably want to take Tua. This is certainly an opportunity for one of those teams that we mentioned to jump up and grab somebody like Tua or Justin Herbert, who's having a decent day at the combine today. So, Jack, I don't know what you want to do here. I know we're not doing trades, so I don't know what position you want the Giants to take, but presumably I would think quarterback is off the table, but you do have another new regime in there.
Yeah, you have a new head coach, Joe Judge, but Gettleman's still in place. Daniel Jones had a promising rookie year. I don't expect him to go quarterback, but you need to upgrade what's up in front of him. That's the offensive line. Nate Solder was a bad free agent signing. They have Kevin Zeitler. They have Will Hernandez. So the interior is solid, but you need an offensive tackle. And there is a great crop of offensive tackles. I think you could see 5 going in the first round. And when you're looking at the board, and we're going off of the Draft Network's board here, Jedrick Wells, the offensive tackle out of Alabama, is the top one. So that's going to be my pick here at number 4. Wells immediately slides into left tackle, and Daniel Jones gets great protection up front. Solid protection, and Wills, if all pans out, is the left tackle for the Giants for the next decade, protecting Daniel Jones and creating holes for Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I think if they don't trade out that pick, which I think is very likely at this point, I think they'll take the best tackle available, at least on their board. And, we'll go with the predictive board here on the Draft Network. And because that says Jedrick Wills, that's where he's headed right now to New York. All right, next we have the Miami Dolphins, who have 2 picks in the first round. One their own being the 5th pick, and then one from the trade that they made with the Pittsburgh Steelers, sending Minka Fitzpatrick to Pittsburgh. So they have 2 first-round picks, and I think Jack they have 3, don't they? They have 3.
3 first-round picks.
They have 3 first-round picks. One from the trade that they made with Houston, sending Tunsil to the Texans. So they have 3 first-round picks, and they find themselves in a very unique position in this draft, being able to potentially get 3 starters on a team that I think played a lot harder than we thought they would. That roster was really torn down going into last season, and they still managed to win a few games last year, and that just speaks to the kind of coach that Brian Flores is, and presumably they want to take a quarterback here. All the signs, at least to me, point to Tua, based on the info that's been thrown out there, and being that they have a guy in Ryan Fitzpatrick who could be a bridge quarterback to Tua, somebody that Tua can continue to rehab under, continue to learn. I think that'd be a great location for Tua and where he's at in his recovery, and just a better scenario for the Miami Dolphins, who are looking to rebuild a roster that, like I said before, they really stripped in the last off.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Tua going to Miami is perfect. Like you said, he sits behind Ryan Fitzpatrick. He can continue to rehab the hip injury. They have a ton of cap space. They have a great amount of draft capital. They are doing what the Browns did a couple years ago under Sashi Brown. The only difference is they have a solid head coach, and Brian Flores, who still coached his ass off last year, got them to 5 wins when no one thought that they would win a game. I mean, that goes to show you that, that guy kept coaching even though the front office was going in the direction of, we were going to tear this down, stockpile draft picks, accumulate assets, and just build this team the way we want to. So I think they're going in the right direction. You get the quarterback here at this pick, or maybe even they trade up. I ultimately think they're going to have to trade up to get Tua, because there is a lot of teams behind them that need quarterbacks as well. And then you have those extra picks to where then you can start to build that roster for the future, and hopefully it all pays off for them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that they'll absolutely have to trade up to get Tua. They definitely have the draft capital to do so with those 3 first-round picks. So we'll mark Tua down here as a pick right now, but we believe that they're both going to have to trade up in order to get Tua with where they're at right now. Number 6, the Los Angeles Chargers. They're, to me, Jack, I think that they'll be going quarterback here. I think that it's the best thing to do right now, regardless of the situation with Philip Rivers. Whether he moves on to a different team, whether they can convince him to come back for another year or whatnot. At some point, they're going to have to replace them, and I think they should do it in this draft. And to me, the next quarterback on the list will be Justin Herbert. I think that's where they should go with this pick.
Agreed. That's going to be the pick. Justin Herbert, he killed it at the Senior Bowl. He's having a strong combine. Phillip Rivers is moving on. That's already been confirmed. He's not coming back. And, they have Tyrod Taylor in place, so they have the bridge quarterback, obviously, in him. They've been rumored to get Tom Brady. Even if they get Tom Brady, I would still take Justin Herbert at 6. Brady's 43 years old. He's only going to play for a couple more years. I mean, if Herbert has to sit behind him for those couple of years, so be it. I mean, Herbert's already displayed that he can be a potential franchise quarterback. Sitting behind the greatest quarterback of all time isn't a bad thing. So, LA, they're moving into the big stadium. They're going to have to sell tickets. Herbert has shown that he can be the guy, and whether he has to sit behind a veteran quarterback like a Tyrod, like a Tom Brady potentially, in a couple years, once he's ready, or if he has to be ready day one, I think that's going to excite fans in Los Angeles, even though the Chargers are still kind of third wheel behind the Rams and the Raiders, who are moving to Las Vegas.
This is an interesting. Um, I've heard the thing of him wanting 2 years. If he plays there 2 years, they're beyond in win now mode. Would you not agree? So if they're in win now mode, can they really afford to take a quarterback at number 6? Just maybe take a guy, maybe the best receiver in the draft, maybe take a Jerry Jeudy to help him out. Maybe take a top defensive player to build the defense, or to continue to build the defense that's very good. Maybe like an Isaiah Simmons or Derek Brown to go alongside Joey Bosa out there on the Chargers. Would you think that'd be the better move if they signed Tom Brady?
I mean, potentially. I mean, they have some solid receivers already in place. They got a decent offensive line. You're not taking a running back at 6. Their defense, like you said, is already pretty good with Boza and Derwin James. They got some other pieces there, but I would still take the quarterback. I mean, Brady says he wants to play a couple more years. Who knows how long he's going to be able to stay healthy? I mean, he's doing pretty damn good job already, but I would still play him for the future. I think even if you get Brady, I think they have some cap space. They have extra draft picks. They can continue to build and still compete and contend in the AFC. But I would still plan moving forward for the quarterback, and that's why I would take Herbert here.
All right. Next is the Carolina Panthers. They are picking number 7 in this draft, and they could go a variety of ways here. I don't think there's a quarterback at this point that could go. I know that there have been talks about maybe Jordan Love going this high if they move on, or they've talked about moving on from Cam Newton. So he's presumably on his way out there. They're going to need a quarterback. Is this a spot where they could potentially reach to get a quarterback, or do you think that this might be another trade down spot for maybe somebody who wants a premier offensive lineman or one of the top wide receivers in this draft?
I think at this point, if there wasn't a quarterback on the board, for Carolina, I would just stay here, take the best player, and then, maybe move up into the late first round, take a Jordan Love, take a Jacob Eason. But, Carolina's got a lot of holes. They need help on the defensive side of the ball, especially with Luke Kuechly retiring. So I would stay here in this point and just take the best defensive player on the board.
And on the Draft Network's board, that would be Derek Brown, the interior defensive lineman out of Auburn. So we'll have him going to the Carolina Panthers. Next up is the Arizona Cardinals, who have definitely seemed like they found their quarterback with Kyler Murray. He had a fantastic rookie season. And to me, Jack, the next thing for them to do is protect him. Their offensive line was not very good out there in Arizona, so presumably I would definitely go offensive tackle here. I don't know about you.
Yeah, they could go offensive tackle here. They did just re-sign DJ Humphries to a 3-year deal, so their left tackle is secured. They could go right tackle here, which means it would be Tristan Dwarfs hypothetically. They also could use a receiver. Larry Fitzgerald is coming back. They did draft Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler last year in the draft, but it wouldn't hurt to take another receiver. And there's some pretty good ones here with CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma and the 2 Alabama receivers, Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs. So we got a debate here on what the Cardinals should do.
Well, it's your selection on this pick, so you get to make the final decision here.
They did just re-sign Humphries, so they don't really need offensive tackle right now. They could get one later, maybe in the second round. So let's go wide receiver. Let's give Kyler Murray a big target. And why not get his old teammate from Oklahoma? Let's give him CeeDee Lamb here.
All right. That could definitely be quite the pairing out there in Arizona to have those 2 guys back together out in the desert. For me, I would definitely give him – I know they re-signed DJ Humphries, but I would in this scenario, I would have them take Tristan Wirfs. I think that if you can solidify both sides of the line to protect Kyler Murray, I think that it would be a good opportunity to do so. But to me, I would draft Wirfs if I was Arizona, solidify that right side along with your left tackle, and be good to go with your rookie quarterback. Um, but we have them taking CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma for that 8th pick. Number 9, Jacksonville Jaguars. This is another opportunity for a quarterback, but they need help all over the place, especially on the defensive side of football. They're probably going to lose Ngakwe, the big pass rusher. I'm surprised I got that name right. But they need help on the defensive side of the ball after trading away Jalen Ramsey too last year. So to me, Jack, I think Isaiah Simmons would be a great selection in this spot for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I mean Isaiah Simmons makes a ton of sense here. They're going to be losing some guys on the defensive side of the ball. You pair him up with Miles Jack in the linebacking core, and then you have Simmons' ability to play like as a safety. Even, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world for when they're losing Ngakwe, Marcel Darius. They declined his option. Calais Campbell's future's in the air, so they need some studs on the defensive side of the ball, and Isaiah Simmons makes all the sense in the world here with this pick.
All right, that leads us up to the last pick of this mock draft that we're going to do. We're going to stop here with the Browns pick, and I know that there's a number of different routes that we can go here with maybe the top wide receiver on the board, another edge rusher in Kalavan Chason from LSU, AJ Spencer, another edge rusher. Those are certainly guys who, if we didn't need offensive line, I would be really happy to have at this point. But based on our conversation with Jake, and it's something that we've been feeling for a long time, and that is drafting an offensive tackle in the first round. And we kind of even projected that going into, after the draft last year. We kind of discussed that over the summer and leading into training camp. I know you yelled at me for talking draft all the way back to when, but that's kind of how it shook out. So the top offensive tackles that are here at this point, there are 3 of them: Mekhi Becton out of Louisville, Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa, and Andrew Thomas out of Georgia. When you look at those 3 guys, Jack, who do you think fits the Browns the most? I know Jake certainly gave his case for Tristan Wirfs.
Yeah, I mean, this is perfect because Wirfs and Thomas are the top 2 offensive tackles I like right now in the draft. I like Becton, but when it comes to the scheme that the Browns are going to run here with Kevin Stefanski, I just don't see him as a natural fit. I mean, he is a massive human being. He can move, but I don't know if he can move quick enough for the scheme. So it would come down to Wirfs and Thomas for me, and it would be tough because I've loved Andrew Thomas the last couple of months. I also love Tristan Wirfs. Here, you stick to the board. That's always been the thing that I've heard about the most. You listen to these football executives. Ozzie Newsome preached it for years. So at this point, I would take Tristan Wirfs here at pick 10 and feel confident that he could play either left or right tackle and be able to protect Baker Mayfield for hopefully the next decade.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic and sticking to the board. I agree with you that I would take Tristan Wirfs here at this point. But when you talk about sticking to the board and this regime being, quote, analytical and whatnot, when you're at a position at this point in this mock draft where you have maybe 5 or 6 different guys that are potentially graded equally, the tiebreaker could definitely be need. Yeah, it would be nice to have Jerry Jeudy. Yeah, it would be nice to have another pass rusher and whatnot. Maybe even interior defensive lineman like Javon Kinlaw sitting down there. But when you're at this point in the draft and you have these guys graded kind of equally, go ahead fill a position that you need to fill, and that's certainly, at least in this one, offensive tackle.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about it, you talk about sticking to the board, and you mentioned, having the wide receivers. I think that's going to be a big decision for these guys come draft night, because when you look at the wide receivers, you've heard Kuiper and Daniel Jeremiah both say that there are 25 to 30 wide receivers on their board within the first 3 rounds. So, hypothetically, Arizona, the Jets, the Raiders, teams that need wide receivers in the top first round, they might go and say, well, the strength of the wide receiver, we can wait. Whereas the strength for offensive linemen or safeties or edge rushers, it's not as strong as the wide receivers are. So it's going to be interesting to see how these teams dictate the draft come draft night, because while there is some talented wide receivers at the top of the draft, they could get guys just as good maybe in the second or third, maybe even the fourth round, because the wide receiver class seems really deep compared to other years. So it's really going to be interesting to see how the board will actually fall come draft night in 2 months.
Yeah, when you have one position that is really loaded, like the wide receiver group and the cornerback group, which at some point we'll talk about, those that pushes some of those guys into the UDFA range, and those guys are always great to find those UFDAs to come in who can help out and fill in the depth in your roster, fill up the bottom of the roster. Hopefully you can strike gold at that point. And that's where that seventh round pick should be used. Use it on, in your opinion, the best UDFA that you'd be able to find, because then he's locked in, and nobody else can poach him. Use it on that best player towards the end of the draft right there that you really think can shake out and help you out. If you don't think you can sign him as a UDFA, so that's a situation that we'll definitely get into later on and talk about and discuss. And next week, Browns mock draft is going to be helping us out and whatnot. Doing some stuff on the website, doing some stuff on social media. So we're looking forward to that. And Jack, is there anything else you want to discuss before we got out of here?
Just that next week we are scheduled to have Jared Mueller of the OBR on with us. He's out in Indianapolis right now at the Combine, hanging out with friends of the show like Mark Schofield and whatnot. So stay tuned for that episode next week. And as always, follow me on Twitter at JackMcCurry08.
As always, follow me on Twitter at AnthonyJokiJK. Be sure to follow the website and the podcast on Twitter at The Dogland. You'll find the same info on Facebook at the same at as well. Be sure to rate, subscribe, review our podcast. We absolutely appreciate it. We got a lot more content coming up in terms of audio and stuff on the website as well. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. And until then, and as always, go Browns.